Welcome to the Pioneer Podcast. This is Ernst Roots, and today we are talking about a very important topic that in many ways underpins our conversations on this podcast, the conversations we have had and the conversations that we will be having in the months and the years to follow. And if you have been following this podcast, you would have heard me reference the solidarity movement throughout. And the point of today's conversation is to talk about the solidarity movement. What is the solidarity movement, and what is so unique about the solidarity movement as a network of institutions through which the Afrikaner community in particular is working to ensure a safe, free and prosperous future for our community. And so to join me for this conversation is Flip Buys, the chairperson of the Solidarity Movement. Flip Buys, thank you very much. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ernst.
So, Flip, you became the head of the Mine Workers Union, as it was known back then, in 1997, which then changed its name eventually to Solidarity, which eventually grew into the Solidarity Movement as we know it today. And today it's a very big network of institutions with thousands of employees if you count all the institutions together. But back then, when you became the head of the trade union, at least, it wasn't nearly comparable to what we have today. So perhaps just maybe a good way to start is just say what were things like at the beginning, and then we can talk about how it evolved into what we have today.
Yeah, Ernst, in 1997, 30 years ago, the situation in South Africa was totally different. It was at that stage also very polarized, but my view was that when there's a new dispensation, Afrikaners would be on the receiving end of the new government. As we all know, the ANC are still in alliance with the South African Communist Party. They have Marxist rules and Marxist roots. And so for me it was necessary that we established what I termed a help mekaar, help each other organization. It is part of our culture. Under British colonialism, we have started a help mekaar movement, help each other movement of self-help organizations that focus on every important part of life. So that is what we've also decided at that stage. So our aim was to build a broadly conservative movement who are pro-market economy, pro-rule of law, pro-family, who are pro-democracy, pro-individual rights, but also who are willing and able to protect our language and our culture.
And so this, you touched on this now, but a lot of people, when they hear trade union, they think socialism or communism or Marxism. But it's interesting, and it's not just interesting, it's very important to point out that the solidarity movement sprouted or grew from a trade union. Yeah. And I remember back then already hearing you explaining that we need to understand there's a difference between the Christian tradition of trade unionism and the socialist tradition.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I think we all know the socialist tradition, but the Christian tradition is more a conservative tradition. People who formed the union in order to conserve, to protect people's jobs, to conserve the economy, and so on. So it was much more positive orientated trade union. So if you look at the Polish Solidarity, it was a very strong anti-communist union. And we took a look at many different unions in the world. For example, in the Netherlands, a Christian, very strong tradition of Christian trade unions. We also have to look at the Israeli Histadrut, who played a very big role under the leadership of David Ben-Gurion and Golda Meir to build up Israel. So it is not a union who tried to destroy, tried to strike the whole time and so on. It was more the start of a self-help organization. And that is why I say it is part of our culture, the whole idea of self-help organizations. We, in many decades, if not centuries of our existence as a people in this vicinity, the past 3 centuries, mostly we didn't have a state to look after us. So self-help culture, self-help organizations are for us, not very difficult to understand, and so we form self-help organizations, and that is what we still do today.
And so, during these early years in the 1990s, you announced that the solidarity, the union, has to grow and become a movement, a labor movement, but eventually a movement bigger than that, which at the time was almost pie in the sky because the solidarity was still very small, and many of the Afrikaner institutions historically have been discredited. But back then already you said, no, we need to build a movement. What did you mean by that, and why did you think it's necessary? Because that was still at the time of the euphoria about the new South Africa, and I hope that South Africa would become what was promised during the 1990s.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand a little bit more about South Africa. South Africa is geographically and demographically a very, very diverse country. If you look at the number of languages, we had 11 official languages in South Africa, then that says something about the diversity. Secondly, we are basically as large as, nearly as large as Western Europe. So South Africa is a very complex country. It's much more subcontinent than a country. Much more, if you look at West Africa or East Africa or Western Europe, it is not only one country, it is more a subcontinent. And for us, our view was that it's basically impossible to govern it as a central state, as many smaller countries in the world. If you look at the distance between South Africa, between the northern and the southern, the southern part of South Africa, it is 2,000 kilometers. It's the same distance that you get from London to Rome. But the one go through one country, the other one through about 6 or 8 countries. So, secondly, if you look at the history when Marxist liberation movements have took over, many African states post-independently, and also, of course, in other parts of the world, it was unfortunately a failure. So it was very clear to us that the ANC have made concessions in order to gain the power, and once they have really consolidated their power, they will fall back on their original policies. And that was actually what happened. Let me give you one example. Many people think that South Africa is a non-racial country because the Constitution, Article 1, talks about the whole bottom line of the country is non-racialism. But the ANC have enacted more than 116 race laws since 1994. And so we are again the most, very tightly regulated with regard to race. So the racial dispensation wasn't dismantled; it was put on a new management and reversed. And so we foresaw that in 1997, because we have read the ANC documents, they make it clear what they are going to do. And so we plan for, if I can quote Churchill here, not for the next election, but for the next generation. So we plan for longer time frames, and so we have said that we can't wait until people discover who the ANC really are, that they will not be able to govern a modern country. They have never, governed anywhere. And what we also have experienced in Africa, that the requirements of a liberation movement for a successful struggle differ fundamentally from the requirements to govern a modern state. South Africa is basically the only industrialized country in Africa, and it was clear to us, if you look at the ANC's policies, that they will not be able to govern the country. If you look at Botswana, they are a conservative, moderate government. It is safe. It is a successful country. Even Zambia and other countries, but the ANC is much more different than that. So we feel that we had to plan to form and to develop the self-help movement because the state will not help us in any way. And yeah, we will be a very discredited and a very, a minority that will have to look after itself.
One important difference between what you could describe as the Afrikaner approach and what many of our friends in America and Europe are used to is that we have a very strong focus on community institutions, while there's in other countries, such as the ones I mentioned, there's a much bigger hope and focus placed on the government and elections and so forth. So how would you explain then to someone who doesn't live in South Africa, who's only vaguely informed about South Africa, how would you explain to someone what the Solidarity Movement is?
Well, the future have already happened here. South Africa is a demographic democracy. People vote much more for identity than for ideology, or they don't look at performance necessarily. If you look at the outcomes of 30 years of ANC government, we are in a danger of a failed state. And that is not our opinion. Only you can see that many parts of the state have already imploded. The state can't provide dependable electricity to all. There's a crime crisis in South Africa. We have a infrastructure crisis, a water crisis, education crisis, a public health crisis, so it can go on like that. And many state institutions, if not basically the most, are dysfunctional. So what we have said is that, of course, we want to make a contribution to South Africa and to the welfare of South Africa and all its people. But we do not influence government policy. Demographics in South Africa are much different than, for example, in the United States. And we will have to face the facts. And so if you are an unpopular minority, perhaps an overperforming minority, you will have to look at your, after your own interests. And that will also empower you to make a contribution to the country on the whole. But we are basically, because I said South Africa is a subcontinent, consisting of basically of many nations who was forced by British colonialism in one country, and we will have to look at the interests of our own people, because the state won't do that.
So some people have described the Solidarity Movement as a state within a state. Do you think, well, firstly, what does that mean? And secondly, also, do you think this is an accurate description, or how would you describe it then?
Yeah, it is basically, you can see that as a state within a state. If you have a situation where the institutions of the state is failing, for example, the police, the criminal justice system, we have to start neighborhood watches, and we have to look after the safety of thousands of people. So we have neighborhood watches in more than 180 towns and cities in South Africa, to name one example. If I can give another example, you have a totally different affirmative action approach in South Africa than, for example, in the United States. We have more than, like I've said, more than 100 race laws who actively discriminated against about 5% of young white people. So they do not get access to, for example, technical training. So we had to start a technical training center. Now we have the largest technical training center in the country. But now what we do, we believe in bonding and bridging. So we have bonded with our own community, we have established the center, and we did not establish that through very large contributions from big business and so on. We believe in crowdfunding. Thousands of people make small contributions, and you make big money with small money. And we have built a very expensive, the largest technical college in the country, and I believe we are up to the standards in what you get in the United States and Germany and so on. And now we try to help other cultural communities in South Africa also, and even to help state colleges who have the quality to improve the quality of their training. So it is basically bonding and bridging idea that we have got in South Africa.
And so you have remarked before that part of or one of our problems is that we in many ways have to fulfill what you could describe as the functions of a government, but we don't levy taxes. So the burden on us in terms of income and revenue is much harder. It's much more difficult, but also the result thereof is in some ways that the responsibility to work transparently and to work responsibly with our money is very important. Can you say something about, let me just first add that almost everything we've done over the last few decades was from internal funding, from members making small donations. Can you say something about maybe the funding model behind the movement, but then also why we believe it's important to reach out to our friends abroad?
Yeah, see, our biggest strategic challenge is to provide state services without state income. It is very difficult if you work with, you must establish colleges and schools and universities and countrywide safety structures, without tax money. It's very, very difficult. So we work through a lot of, with a lot of volunteers. We have on every terrain, for example, we have a welfare organization, basically more than a workfare organization, a countrywide organization, and we have charity shops in every town. And so every town look after its own needs. If there's a feeding project at a school or an old age home, we do not get subsidy from government and so on. So we, that town provide then their own funding for the projects in that town. But it is not enough. It is very difficult, like I said, to provide state services without state income. So what we try to do, we start with voluntary contributions, what we get about from 600,000 people. And then you get people, for example, they pay for their children's studies at one of our educational institutions. And we have a business leg, I've mentioned the charity shops. We have also financial services that we provide, to members. So that is our biggest challenge. If you look at the infrastructure of a town, and you must help with the waterworks of a town or with the electricity systems of a part of a city. So it is really very difficult.
Flabase, thank you very much. The Solidarity Movement is involved with a wide variety of projects that we are implementing through the various institutions that form part of this movement. These institutions include Solidarity, AfriForum, the Solidarity Helping Hand, the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Organization, various educational institutions, and so forth. Some of these major projects include the building of a new campus for academia. It includes expanding our community safety initiatives at AfriForum. It involves expanding our bursary programs through which we are helping underprivileged children to be able to study and provide a future for themselves and their communities. If you are interested in becoming involved or supporting these initiatives, send us an email or click on the link in the description.